tricks around asset management. We've all picked up new tips and tricks around maintenance, reliability, and asset management. And I'd like to welcome you to our last panel session of this conference. We're very pleased to have international representatives from the Global Forum on Maintenance and Asset Management, so GFMAM, and the World Partners in Asset Management, WPIAM, joining us for a panel session on how asset management contributes to reliability in unreliable times. I'd like to introduce, most of you know who I am. I'm Susan Lubell. I'm the past president of PEMAC. We're going to zip past some of these bios because I think I know most of you. In alphabetical order, I'd like to introduce you to João Lafraia. Lafraia is the president of the Brazilian Association, ABRAMAN, and the associations are very similar to PEMAC. They're not-for-profit for their regions or countries. Lafraia brings a wealth of experience in his roles with refineries around Brazil, and I'm looking forward to his contributions to the discussion on asset management. Johannes Coetzee hopefully will join us in a few minutes. He represents SAAMA, which is the Southern African Asset Management Association. Again, he brings great background in maintenance and asset management fields. John Hardwick joins us from Australia. He's with the Asset Management Council. He's the past chair of the Asset Management Council, and he brings a wealth of experience in his current role with the Sydney, Australia Roads and Maritime Services. John is the co-author of Living Asset Management, along with Lafraia. And I'd like to introduce Naoki Takesue. Naoki represents the Japanese Association of Asset Management and is a research director at the Mitsubishi Research Institute. He brings great experience in the fields of construction management and asset management for both public and private sectors. Now, we've got all of those introductions out of the way, and one of the things that I'm sure you want to hear about is what's happening from a panel perspective. Please feel free to enter your questions, comments in the Q&A and the chat, and we'll get to them as we start moving forward here. To kick things off, I thought I'd start with a couple of panel questions. So the first one, really when we start to look at unreliable times, with the recent increase in both severity and frequency of natural disasters, climate, and weather events, what consequences are you seeing in your region? We certainly have been seeing this in Canada all summer. Anyone like to volunteer to go first?
I'm happy to go first if you like. Is that okay, Lafraia and Naoki?
Is it okay for me, John?
Thank you. So it's really nice to be here with you, Susan, and thank you for the opportunity to chat with the members of PEMAC. I think it's a great opportunity for us during the COVID times for us to be able to share internationally. So I'm really pleased to be here. And I think this topic area excites me a lot. It's an area where I think asset management really comes to the fore. It's the way of thinking and the way of integrating businesses. If you look at Australia, like Canada, it's a very diverse country, very large. We have deserts. We also have rainforests. We don't quite get as cold as you do in Canada, I've got to say, but we still do have a very diverse environment in which we live. And we've always had things like bushfires and floods and those things. But interestingly, if I look at just 2019 and 2020, it's probably been our worst events that we've ever had back to back of things that have gone and happened. So if we just look at the Black Summer we had in 2019-20, we burnt up over 180,000 square kilometres of bushland was burnt on the east coast of Australia, which is massive. When you think about it in terms of, we all know the size of England, it's only 130,000 square kilometres. So we burnt a land size greater than the size of England. And I think it destroyed over 3,000 homes. We had 34 deaths, and then there was 445 indirect deaths that were attributed to the bushfires. Over 1 billion mammals, birds and reptiles died as part of that. The economic impact of it was over $100 billion Australian. And I think when you look at the context of that, and you look at it, it's not the worst bushfire we've ever had in Australia. There was another one in 2009. And I think one of the key components of that is they were defined, and we defined in a risk sense, as a 1 in a 100-year event. Well, we just had 2 1 in 100-year events that occurred only 10 years apart. And then you back up with that, within days of the end of some of those bushfires, we then had floods. So we went from bushfires to floods. So the floods put out the bushfires, but then we had floods that caused a massive amount of damage themselves. So those floods in Queensland and New South Wales saw large parts of our states go underwater. And we experienced our heaviest rainfall in 30 years, gale force winds. We ended up with homes that had never, homes that were less than 10, 15 years old were washed into the ocean. As part of that, the ocean actually came up so far during those events. And you put those two things together, and then you go, ooh, we then had a pandemic within a month. So we were then locked down. So you have these 3 significant events. And we've since then, in the last 12 months, we've also had another round of very large floods and gale force winds. So there is no doubt when you look at the events that things are changing. And for us as asset managers, it has massive impacts on how we think about our assets. And I might talk a little more as we go through this, Susan, around what we've done around those events. But we're clearly looking at the resilience. We're looking at the way in which we build things. We're looking at the way in which we plan for what places for people to live and things that people will do. So I might leave it there, and then I'll come back once Lafraia and Naoki have had a chance.
Thanks, John. Lafraia, would you like to share with us your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Susan, for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be here with you, John, and all Canadians. It's a great time when we can meet and visit our countries. I think we missed that with this pandemic, but certainly the weather is changing in Brazil. We are suffering a severe drought in Brazil. For the last, I would say, 100 years, our water reservoir are lower than ever. And we have a huge energy crisis because Brazilian hydro power comes from hydroelectricity that is moved by water. And with this drought, the reservoir are very, very low level, and also water for drinking. So São Paulo and some big cities are suffering with water shortages and rations, portions of the day without water. So we have to change our energy matrix from hydro to gas, and even oil, and we are not prepared for that. So we have a equivalent power generation 3 times greater than we have today, but we have no capability because there is no water. So you have to change the whole asset base in order to cope with this climate change. Of course, this drought has brought some natural disaster fires, similar to bushfires in Australia, as John mentioned, and a huge part of our forest, besides those natural forests, has been burned because people want to use vegetable coal for sustainability, for their own sustainability, and that's a huge problem as well, as you've been watching the news. So certainly Brazil is going through a very drastic change in terms of asset base. Of course, we have a lot of river that could be used for transportation of crop production that are stopped because we have no water for the boats to go around. So we are using trucks and roads, increasing energy prices, inflation comes down, and even we are facing the possibility of a recession just due to climate change. So that's a harsh reality. It's not nice to talk about, but I think everybody is in the same boat, and it's good to share with you.
Thank you, Lafraia. I appreciate your perspective from Brazil. Naoki, would you like to share the Japanese perspective?
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much. Thank you, Susan. Invite us. I'm very honored to be here as a representative of JAAM. Actually, Japan is much smaller countries than Canada, Australia, and Brazil. And then Japan is surrounded by the sea, and then 80% of the country is in mountain areas. There are many steep mountain ranges and there are a lot of steep rivers, and then we have a lot of infrastructure under such severe natural and then topographical conditions. And in addition, we have many active faults under the ground, and one of the world's leading seismic plates in the surrounding trench. So for this reason, we are suffering frequent natural disasters such as typhoons, storms, storm surges, heavy rains, big debris flows, slope failures, and so on. Also, earthquakes, as you know, occur every year. So especially in recent years, flood damage caused by localized torrential rains has frequently occurred all over the country. It's probably due to the effects of climate change. Furthermore, risk of big earthquakes, so-called Nankai to Nankai earthquake, and earthquake directly below the capital is increasing. So Japan is required to prepare for these big natural disasters urgently. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Naoki. And I see Johannes has joined us. Sounds like you had a bad thunderstorm.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Much appreciated, and my apology for being a few minutes late. It was a struggle, and as a matter of fact, I'm still in the thunderstorm. So if you hear a loud bang in the back, I'm not in a war zone, I'm not in danger. If you see me getting wet, that's a different story. But it's an interesting phenomenon that we have to talk about, climate change, and I'm in the middle of a serious thunderstorm, although I have to point out that where I am, thunderstorms are not unique. But in South Africa, I mean, we've seen clear changes in the and consequences due to climate change. South Africa is a large part that is relatively dry and semi-arid, and over the past few years, we've seen some serious droughts. And some of you might have heard of Cape Town having had the day zero scare a couple of years ago. Well, they had for 3 years basically no rain, and that led them literally to a point where the dams went as low as almost 10% of the water volume, which would have led to a point in time where they simply wouldn't have had any water. Now that, as far as it is from a climate issue, the root cause, from an asset management point of view, the effect on assets and how you deal with assets was tremendous, and how to understand how to, basic things like sanitation systems. If there's not enough water, how do you flow and clean sanitation systems that wasn't designed to run without water, etc. So yeah, I can probably talk quite a long bit about it, but I think it's a very interesting topic. And to bring it back to asset management, there's quite a lot of work that we'll need to do. And it's not a problem that's going to go away. It's probably going to worsen in many parts of the world in the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think from a Canadian perspective, certainly this past summer, we saw the hottest recorded temperatures in Lytton, BC for 3 days in a row, followed by a massive fire that burnt down the town. My colleagues who are up in the Northwest Territories were worried about the permafrost melting. So certainly we've had fires, floods, and similar type changes in the weather patterns and temperatures. And so I think from a Canadian perspective, we can relate very much to what you're talking about around the world. So it's not just localized, this is becoming a global phenomenon. I'd like to take that link and leap over to what you started to allude to, which is really about sharing some of the changes that you see, whether in terms of public policy or individual companies or organizations. What measures are you adopting to address these consequences, particularly when it comes to resilience and infrastructure? Johannes, you started to lead into this a little bit with your talking about the dams. Would you like to share with us your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's probably two areas, and my apology once again if the background noise is a bit unstable. There's two areas I think that we would touch on, and I think the first one is water and water reticulation. The second one would be coal and coal mining. I think those are the two topics of interest, at least in the South African context. I'll unpack them separately. So water and sanitation obviously needs water. Dams takes time to build. It's obviously massive capex that need to be budgeted for, and typically, you know, especially in a developing country like ourselves, you know, it's in a rare expense that it's very difficult to find money to build dams overnight. And the reality is we have to increase the capacity of water that we can keep at any point in time, because, you know, the way things are going, we are going to start seeing more and more dry years going forward. And areas that used to get water and was able to plant crops and food wouldn't be able to do such, which would make us, you know, reliant on importing certain foods, etc. So I think from an asset base and an asset infrastructure, it's massive challenges. Also, you know, how do you design these things different? You know, in the past, we were very wasteful, for instance, with electricity. We've got a well-known issue with electricity in South Africa as well. Doesn't sound good for us, does it? But I mean, if you similarly use that context in the water space, for instance, that's very much more based on climate. You know, we have to learn how to work with less water, how to make systems work with less water, and how to maintain what we have much better. You know, infrastructure that gets older, you can't afford leaking and wasting water anywhere. So it puts an immense pressure on maintenance in particular of these infrastructures. On the other side, on the flip side, I think a different argument on coal side, for instance, I mean, I'm sure most of the people are aware with, you know, investment in coal mining in particular becoming a real issue. From a stakeholder point of view, from a shareholder point of view, and obviously the banks are very cautious with where they put their money and what public opinion about that would be. So what we find in South Africa, less and less mines get money to actually develop new coal mines or even buy existing coal mines. More so, you get the bigger coal mining companies, the more established, well-known brands, and I don't want to single out any company at this point in time, that run mines very efficiently and good and in a safe and environmentally healthy way. They want to get rid of these type of assets. And that then ends up with second tier and sometimes third tier companies who are not as good with HSSE environment in particular and a number of other aspects. So from a, once again, asset management point of view, you know, the money becomes less and less to actually maintain these assets well. And some of these mines are dangerous if you don't maintain them properly. So it becomes a real challenge very quickly in the engineering space. You know, something that we could argue to say, well, it's environmental and there's people that needs to look at it. It's very much becoming an engineering problem, and in the asset management space and maintenance management space in a big way.
Excellent. And I like how you've brought in the concepts not only of the water, which is much more public policy, but also discussion around our industries. And we all know that we need to think about that from our company policy measures, funding, and all of those sorts of things when we look at the broader picture of asset management. Naoki, would you like to share with us a little bit about the Japanese perspective on public policy and company policy?
Okay. Okay. So as probably I believe everybody knows that the Japan faced a big earthquake in 2011. Since the East Japan big earthquake disaster in 2011, Japan formulated a basic plan for natural resilience and has tried to strengthen the resilience by improving hard and soft, both. On the hard side, the Japanese government has strengthened the infrastructure, such as improving the earthquake resistance of structures and expanding and raising the coastal levees and introducing basin disaster control that covers multiple river systems. On the soft side, it is very unique. Our national and the local governments have been focusing on prompt information provision to citizens regarding disaster risks and damage situations in timely manner. Also, we are putting much effort in education for disaster prevention, such as learning evacuation route and causing behavioral change in the event of disaster to protect our own lives. So every private companies and individuals also cooperating with this the government strategies.
Thanks, Naoki. I think that's really interesting that you're doing both work on the prevention side as you look ahead to implementing good asset management practices, but also risk mitigation through education of the public.
Exactly.
John, would you care to comment from the Australian perspective?
Sure. Thanks, Susan. Yeah, I think what I might do is, so I'll take a different view and I'll try and do it from a government perspective.
Sure.
So my current role is the Executive Director for Asset Management across Transport for New South Wales. So that's all modes of transport, whether it's trains, buses, ferries, light rail, and all the roads and things, and metros. It all sits within that asset management area. And if we look at the state of New South Wales, which has got the largest population of Australia, you'd look at that, and the Treasury have instigated a policy for asset management. So it's probably one of the first times where there's a policy from the funding side of government saying every cluster, which is every part of government, needs to have an asset management plan and a strategic asset management plan. And as part of that, you actually have to show what you spend on resilience and what are the projects and programs you have on resilience related to that. And if I look at our one from a transport perspective, so we have around 30,000 people that work in the transport area and 130,000 contractors that actually contract into us. It's a $72 billion program of work that's over a 4-year period that we're working on. And when you look at the asset management policy from Treasury, every dollar we spend, whether it's the services of people at train stations or anything else, all flows in through our asset management plan. So we have very much moved to an asset management world where we're looking at that being able to give the future view of what we need to spend to deliver the outcomes for the community. So within that, we have to put forward a 10-year plan of what total expenditure. It's not a CapEx or an OpEx component. It's a total expenditure view of what we need to sustainably manage the assets in the long term. It gives the financial people in Treasury the opportunity to analyse the risks and the consequences to community. And they're really looking through 3 lenses. They're looking through place-based resilience. So is the things that transport doing, for instance, improving the resilience of the places of New South Wales? It's then looking at what we're doing from an asset and services point of view. Are the assets and services we're spending money on appropriate for the future over the next 10 years, and is it sustainable? One of our challenges, I think, is a lot of people talk about sustainability and a lot of people talk about resilience. They're actually very heavily connected, and the way in which we think about them. And then the third one is around organisational resilience. Do we have the capabilities for the future? Technology's changing. The solutions to the problems that Johannes and Naoki just talked about are different to the past. So it's about having people with different capabilities and realizing that, you know, in asset management terms, there's the 4 principles of asset management, but Lafraia and I have talked for a number of years now on adaptability. Organizations being able to adapt and change is critically important, and having a rigid asset management approach does not work. Every organization I've implemented asset management in has been different, and it has to take into account the culture of the organization, the behaviors, but also the level of maturity of the organization. So in an Australian and a New South Wales context, we're very quickly moving down that asset management world into government setting the policies around it needing to be done. And what's happened is it's cascading now into every business has to have an asset management plan. So it's a very big change to get people to predict the future and show what they need to do for the next 10 to 15 years, not just about what they need to do for the next 12 months to 2 years.
Before we go to Lafraia, we had a question come in that I think just leads right nicely into what John's just been talking about. Neil asked, what role should asset management professionals take to communicate the need for change due to climate change to customers and consumers who ultimately pay for service provision in a highly political environment?
Yeah, and it's great question, and it's down the plan. So, one of the things we've got to do is be brutally honest ability of the services we provide and whether the state can afford them, and it's then up to the political component to work out how they're going to fund those things and be capable of doing that. And I think it's the piece that we're doing now, and government's getting much more visibility. So what's happening is all the different parts of government are putting in these asset management funding requests. So in the past, people used to think asset management was just about the assets. And I think it's really clear it's the service, it's the outcome, it's what we deliver is what asset management does. So every dollar we spend goes through that asset management plan. So when you think about that for Neil's question, the asset management component is now at the heart of how we deliver our services and our outcomes to the community.
Thanks, John.
If I can add, Susan, if you don't mind, if I can add to what John said.
Absolutely.
I think the interesting case study for us in Cape Town with the day zero water, and day zero literally meant that was the day that was forecasted where the taps would go dry. So the interesting thing of that was it was a huge awareness campaign and getting the actual asset users, not the asset owners, to come on board and assist in asset management. People had to reduce the amount of water they used. It was as simple as that. And by them reducing the amount of water, that day zero date could be pushed forward into the future. So it's not just the asset owners, and especially when it comes to state assets. It's also the users, the people that pay taxes at the end of the day, them also realizing that they've got a role to play in this picture.
Yeah.
Great point, Johannes, and I agree with you fully. Lafraia, would you like to share your perspective on this?
Yeah, Susan, I've attended a workshop in ISO. It's called Sustainable Finance. And I think we are going through this process in Brazil because, people are very worried about the sustainability of their emissions in agriculture. How do you use most of our agriculture subproducts that may use to generate gas, methane, energy from cows and production of biofuels. And I think we need a policy to change the environmental financial approach so that everybody could benefit from the circular economy. I think we lack the planning, governmental planning for that, because people are capable of using it now. We can reuse garbage system in big cities and transform it to natural gas, reducing methane emissions, and but I think asset management can discuss a little bit more this sustainable life cycle from assets, products, and services. The sustainability issue of the environmental problem, I think, has to be dealt with the asset management community. If we stay relate just to financial, I would say, results, we may end up with solutions that are common, but we need to revolutionize the solutions, because if we apply the circular economy, our asset base will change a lot. We may use methane from garbage, for instance, or from biofuels, subproducts. And today, there is no financial support for that. So that's the time where the global community has to think about financial sustainability, and asset management is a big support for that, because financial people don't know about how to transform things in physical assets, for instance, and they need our support. And I think that's a way to improve asset management interest around. And when we start discussing asset management on this basis, people get interested and they understand what asset management is, you know, because if you talk about the whole life cycle, instead of that, talking about the whole circularity of the life cycle, you know, once a defect in a process, we start reusing these materials, whatever material, oil, gas, plastic, whatever material, it has to be sustainable in terms of reusing that. So I think we need public and private discussion of those issues, and asset management is well equipped for that discussion.
And I think one of the things that I'm hearing from all of you here is about that integration. So it's not just finance, it's not just maintenance, it's not just the physical assets. It has to do with the resilience, and what got us here won't get us there for the future. And how do we adapt and change and have a live system of asset management? Certainly, I think North America may not be as far through the maturity curve as some of the other parts of the world. I think we're doing a lot of asset management, but it's more piecemeal and it's less holistically put together at this point. We're starting to see some of the public service and public utilities starting to move forward with the joined up thinking, but it's coming a little bit slower in some of the companies. So we've got sort of our asset management professionals across Canada who have joined us here for this panel discussion. And we've got over 100 people attending right now, talking about asset management. And one of the things, what does it mean? I'd like to get our third panel, official panel question moving forward right now and leave lots of time for Q&A at the end. So I'd like to encourage the people online, somewhere in those 100 people, feel free to type your questions into either the chat or the Q&A so that I'm not doing all the talking here. So last question that I wanted to ask you, I guess two halves of it, is can you share something about the uptake of asset management in your region to enable all of that resilience? We're seeing, as I said, in Canada, pockets, but we don't have it widespread. And then one of the other things is some of this idea around asset management competence that we're seeing. Lafraia, would you like to kick us off instead of having to go last? We're kind of, we'll go reverse it. We'll go in alphabetical order again.
Okay, no worries. I think this is an interesting topic, and I think the certification process provided by WPIM, Global Forum, and other organizations, asset management organizations, are very important in terms of changing culture. We discussed a little bit with Amesh Gulati from the United States how to change into a reliability culture. And CMRP kind of examination in the United States, North America as well, changed it. And I think CAMA and the global certification scheme has a, I would say, important role in, you know, pushing this culture. I've noticed in Brazil, those candidates that were approved in the CAMA exam, they really changed their approach to asset management. It's very interesting, you know, because once they go through the exam ritual, studying the body of knowledge and going through the application process, they end at the final of the pipeline with different mindset. And this has started changing the asset management culture in lots and lots of organizations in Brazil. So I think it's very important that our associations, PEMAC in Canada, Asset Management Council, and SAAMA, JAAM, ABRAMAN, I think this is a huge valuable, and I would say it brings a lot of value for societies and for the practitioners as well. As we are aiming at a global certification process, we are aligning our thinking, we are aligning our practices. And I think this will reach a critical mass, a critical point in numbers of people that is going to promote change in those countries. And so I believe in that. I'm seeing it in small pockets in Brazil, and I think it may happen globally if you keep with that vision spreading that good and sound news that asset management brings to professionals, governments, and institutions. I think is very nice to witness that and being part of this process. I'm very proud of that. We've all involved, and we can really see the results springing from people around. So very interesting. Very good question, Susan.
Thanks, Lafraia. Naoki, would you like to share your Japanese perspective?
Yes, actually, my answers to this question is partially including the last topic, but the Japan is, as I explained, it's a disaster-prone country, but until now, asset management and the resilience have been considered separately. Asset management is an activity under some sort of normal situations, and the resilience is that for abnormal situations. So asset management policy has been applied to reduce the life cycle cost for maintenance and rehabilitation, and also to increase the value of infrastructure, taking account of demands and needs of infrastructure and its ages. But resilience has taken necessary disaster prevention measures by risk management, considering probability and impact of an earthquake and some other disasters. However, due to the frequent occurrence of disasters in recent years in Japan, we are trying to integrate both. For example, when formulating maintenance and rehabilitation plan for infrastructure located near coasts or rivers, a plan for extending service life in normal situation will not work without considering risk of flooding in the event of a disaster. So asset management plan has to consider the location of target infrastructure and its expected disaster risk. This thing it is especially important for network infrastructure. In case of trunk road asset management plan, for example, it is necessary to understand the importance and existing value of its road in the event of a disaster. If it is designated as an emergency transportation road, we are required to carry out more appropriate maintenance and management on a regular basis so that reliable traffic can be secured in the event of a disaster. So in the future, certification of asset management system is a very important check whether appropriate asset management, considering the measures to resilience, is implemented or not under the changes in such external environment. So under these situations, JAAM is a member of WPM and is participating to conduct KAMA Japanese version examinations. Currently, we have around 200 KAMA certificate holders in Japan, and we also launched JAAM Certified Asset Manager qualification system this year. Through these all activities, we'd like to develop asset managers complying with international standards and coping with the above peculiar circumstances to Japan. That's my thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Naoki. And I think that's a nice lead into what John started to talk about before, which was how, as we move forward, asset management and this concept of resilience are shifting, moving together, and making a step change moving forward. John, I can see that you're ready to add to that one, so I'll turn it over to you, and Johannes, you can go last.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Yeah, I think the education piece and the way in which we build capability is probably at the heart of, as Lafraia said, if you want to change behaviours and cultures, you've actually got to give them something new to understand and give them the way to think. And I think what we've done with the World Partners in Asset Management Global Certification Scheme is built a way of getting multilingual and getting that common understanding about asset management. The societies in the different parts of the world give the local context to it, but by having a transportable certification scheme that if someone gets it against the World Partners 3 levels in Canada and they go to live in Australia, it transports directly. So it's really important. I think that global certification scheme, I think, is going to underpin the elevation and the speed with which people in the world actually understand asset management and then apply that in their context. So it's not about just having the certification. The certification is giving people the capability to think differently and be able to actually add more value quickly to their countries. And I think that that certification scheme is critical. And if I look in an Australian context where I am, we've run training courses at the moment, the fundamentals in asset management that we've run that for over 1,000 people in my business already. But that's people from procurement, from finance, business support people, engineering, all of the areas have participated in it. And it's actually having the biggest impact on the culture and the behavior of the organization than anything else. People realize they have to collaborate, work together to solve problems together. And I think for me, getting that global context is really important. So we, from an Asset Management Council point of view, have recently supported the Malaysian Society to establish an asset management society in Malaysia. And only in the last couple of weeks, India has now had official confirmation from government and registration from government. They also now have an asset management society. And I think growing these, getting that global context into training is really, really critical, I think, in actually uplifting the capability of people in different parts of the world. And countries that are evolving in asset management quickly are actually solving these, what I'd call wicked problems, more quickly because they have the capability to do so.
Thanks, John. Johannes?
Yeah, thanks. I love what was said up to now, so I'll do my best not to try and repeat anything. I think I want to link on with what John said about skills being transferable across country borders. And I think maybe do it the inverse. You know, if I look at our side, you know, even inside our country, the need for proper qualification and designations is so great. And I want to use sort of two poles to try and explain that to you. So if I take the mining sector, they're really far down this path with implementing asset management, and they're really adopting it. And I'm specifically now talking your larger mining companies, your first year mining companies. I mean, you would find proper established asset management departments with the right titles, the right skills, you know, all the bits and bobs that you would want to see in there. So it's really heartening and a good feeling to operate with those companies and see what they do and how much they've adopted asset management. If you go to the other end of that, you know, sometimes in the public sector, and when I speak public sector, there's mainly three areas. It's national government, local government, and state-owned enterprises. Within those, there's a massive need for asset management, and they're only now starting to realize this. I mean, and we had ground zero, I almost want to say, in some of those areas. At least we've got in legislation now some basic things like you have to have an asset register. You know, up to a few years ago, that was a foreign concept for public sector. You know, they had sort of a vague idea of how many assets they had and sort of where they were. It became a legal requirement, and there's findings against these entities if they cannot have a detailed asset register that's verifiable. So basic things are being in place. But I think to come back to the skills bit, that what I found very interesting was within public sector, there was a concern that because we don't have formal qualifications and designations in asset management, and typically public sector being very regulated when it comes to, and even unionized when it comes to salaries, you know, a lot of the good skills we had in asset management, engineers, planners, etc., would leave asset management into a field where there's better career opportunities and salary opportunities for them because they couldn't prove their skills. You know, with bringing in asset management related skills and designations in particular, you know, and building that into salary scales, we actually now are able to keep those guys that's really good at what they do in an asset management related role and remunerate them accordingly. And that is something that I'm very excited about, you know, so a big push to get that done.
Thank you. I've got a question here from Ian. He says, how are people and the connection there changing within unreliable times? So he said, example, availability of trades, attrition, retirement, recognition of skills, knowledge transfer. He's got this big long list here. Gig economy, different values of millennials, digitization, required skills and competencies. Would one of you like to comment a little further on that?
Susan, I think we must pull him onto the panel.
Who, Ian? That sounds like a good plan.
So I'm happy to sort of
Go ahead, John.
talk to a part of it, because I actually think they're the issues we're trying to resolve, right? And I think having the context of what are the skills and capabilities of the people you're trying to draw through, making sure that it isn't a one size fits all. People are going to come into the land of asset management, if you want to call it that, from all sorts of backgrounds. And one of the things I've seen is people talk about the younger generation, 7 jobs by the time they're 30, they're going to move around a lot. And I think what asset management is starting to do is people are seeing multiple career paths evolve for them now because they have that capability. So I'm hoping to see a lot more younger people adapt into asset management. And I think because it's starting to help solve problems in those gig economies and the resilience side of things and environmental sustainability, we have a very large cohort of people who do environmental sciences and sustainability things at universities. They're critical people to have flow through your asset management components of your businesses, because they have a lens that they're looking through around that future sustainability in an environmental sense. Then you bring your people that have a financial sustainability lens, and then you bring your engineers in, and that's that melting pot of capability. I know there's a statement that Lafraia once made: the value is in the difference, and the value of the different ways of thinking and the different ways in which people try to express themselves gives a much better outcome. So those diversity of views is critically important to us solving those more challenging problems. And I think if you look at the Global Forum and World Partners, we're only successful because we're listening to each other's diverse views. We've got different multilingual background people coming to these issues with different cultures, different backgrounds. And when we listen to each other, it actually is really fascinating, because we're solving the same problem, but we're thinking about it differently within the cultural context of our countries.
Johannes, it looks like you want to ask a follow-on there.
Absolutely, and I think it's once again, John is spot on, and I want to add to that, making it very practical, maybe, in our own company, without going into what we do as a company. I found that you've got those graybeards, what we call them, without being sexist now. The guys that's been around for very many years, they've got the gray hairs, and if they take their shirt off, all the scars on the back sits from all the years of fighting. So you've got those guys with the experience, but then you've got a problem that is new, a problem that has changed, an environment that has changed, and all those things, digitalization, etc. A very good list that you put up. Those need new skills, but they need the older generation's guidance in terms of how to solve problems in general, but they don't have the answers on how to solve this new problem, if you like. So what has worked for us in our company is being able to balance between old skills, if I can call it that, the graybeards, and having youngsters, real youngsters, fresh from university, fresh from trade, etc., come in with new skills. That wasn't an issue or wasn't the requirement before in the workspace. And having those different views in a meeting and collaborating to solve new problems, I think that's an exciting era for us at this stage.
And I think Erica's put something into the text chat as well. And she said, are there any initiatives to expose the younger generation, so the undergraduate levels of various associated disciplines, to get people involved in the design phase of asset lifecycle right through to asset management practices? So I think you may have actually answered part of Erica's question here. Are there any specific initiatives? Naoki, anything that you're doing specifically to get younger people involved in asset management?
Right. As I said, our case is asset management is mainly from the infrastructure asset management. But the most case, all of the experts come from the construction side. But in the construction industry, actually in Japan, it's not so popular because it is very dangerous, not safe, and not big wages. So for the younger generations, it's not so popular. But for the asset management area and the field, I mean, digitization and the resilience and the finance. A lot of experts have to be invited in this field. That's why this is a good incentive to the younger generations. This is not the constructions, not only the constructions. Very many kinds of the experts have to be put in this asset management field. That's why this asset management, we have to promote this kind of asset management new world to the younger generations.
Naoki, that's such a great point. We're not talking about the old world of asset management. We're talking about new problem solving, dealing with resilience, problem solving, and really awesome opportunities. Got a question here from Sridhar. Can the panelists share some good success stories where the understanding and implementation of an AM model has delivered results and value? And then what were the one or two key things that got you those results? Lafraia, you're back. Your picture's back on. Would you like to answer that question first?
Yeah.
You're going to resent turning your camera back on.
Oh, no. I was just take some water. But I think that's a good question. I used to work in an oil and gas company, and we had to increase the availability of the refinery base, 14 refinery spread around Brazil. And we implemented some basic asset management principles, alignment, critical assets, and having a double check in terms of reliability and asset management plans. And we were able to increase the availability from 85 to 96 first quartile salmon for, I would say, 5-10 years in a sequence, just applying basic asset management principles, alignment, leadership commitment, and using same procedures, using communication and diversity as a cultural driver, so that everybody could join, solve problems, chasing for the root cause of the system problem, and then had increased the reliability level at a level that wasn't seen before, just applying basic concept, basic and sound asset management concept. We called at that time operational excellence. That's how they call it in oil and gas enterprises, but it was really asset management. It was astounding success case, just using fundamentals and really leadership to drive the culture change. That was very, very good example that I lived, and I'm proud, and I recommend to adopt those concepts because they are really powerful and provide good results for the companies.
Sounds good. John, did you have something to share with some success stories and what got you there?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of stories there, Susan, but I think I'm going to talk about one that's actually in train right now and very relevant to the topic. At the moment, we've made a decision at a state level to move to zero emission buses. So moving to zero emission buses, what does that mean? And we're taking a very much an asset management approach to it. When you look at that, it's 20% of our emissions in New South Wales are actually related to buses. So what are we doing with them? It's a substantial issue for us. But when you look at it, we're solving it using life cycle costing techniques. It's a collaborative approach with the industry. And the COVID cases and looking at our adaptability here is, do we want to establish local markets to be able to build these things? You've got the training courses for mechanics. We've got the infrastructure side. Is it going to be hydrogen? Is it going to be electricity? What are we going to be using? So it's actually a really great example of getting the diverse views in the room. We're going through the process of understanding what the options are for the future, looking at the pros and cons, but analysing life cycle costs. In a lot of cases, when people think about a new investment or a capital uplift, they really look at what's the cheapest to build. not necessarily what's the best long-term sustainable outcome. And when you start looking at your supply chains and your capabilities, it basically means that we're going to create a whole lot of new industries. So we're looking at, because of COVID and the difficulties with getting things from the international market, is this an opportunity to grow a whole new sector of capability within Australia? And so it's a fascinating problem, but it's taken leadership to give the frame and the context, like Lafraia was talking about. We're using the process to get alignment of people. And if you think through that, the model of asset management lens, we're now integrating the whole life cycle of assets and the services they provide, even looking at, are the services we're providing through those bus services the right services? So to a comment around the demand side that Johannes talked about earlier, do we want to increase the demand for this service? Do we want to decrease the demand for this service? How does it fit with railway networks? How does it fit with roads and active transport? All of those concepts are coming into the strategy we're building right now. And we will, the objective is by 2030 or 2035 to have made that full transition out of the diesel bus into a new technology. But we defined the outcome we wanted to produce. We didn't say how we were going to get there. And asset management is helping us translate those requirements into the outcomes.
Excellent. And I think that's very relatable to a lot of our Canadian audience. We've got a lot of our PEMAC members here today working in transportation and public sector, but also manufacturing. And Canada's a large, cold country. So we have an awful lot of roads. Not much is hooked up by railway and not enough buses. So we're also wrestling with the ideas of hydrogen. So gray hydrogen, blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, phasing out coal to burn natural gas. Where we can, we use hydroelectric power, but all of our electricity, all of our transportation mechanisms are starting to look at similar things. Gaz told me I could go slightly long. I got one more question here in the text chat. Says, hello, panel members. This is from Rob Lash, so most of you know him.
Hey, Rob.
It says, thank you for sharing your expertise. Great to see you. With respect to culture and leadership to move forward, what you're saying is forward, what are you finding is working well to influence change in direction of life cycle asset management rather than other programs or regulations that we've started to see pop up? Like, do we need a climate change program or policy focused on the most immediate needs?
I'm going to have a go because I know I'm in that sort of public area and the culture and the behavioural side. So inside the business, when I started in the transport area, the maturity in asset management was so low, I never talked about asset management. I started the conversation around what are the things we need to do for customers and what are the outcomes. And I think asset management is a way of delivering outcomes. It's not an outcome in itself. And too many people connected into that I'm doing asset management. Well, no, we're actually delivering outcomes. So when we talk about an asset management plan, we talk about an asset and services plan. So we've changed the language to say it's actually the service, it's the outcome we deliver, not the asset. So, Rob, one of our biggest things is getting the collaboration at an executive level. You must get executive buy-in to understanding how asset management enables an organisation to deliver outcomes. And I think that's where a transition has happened for us in the last 5 years in Australia, is it's an underpinning capability to delivering services and outcomes to the community. So I sit very much in the background within the organisation and aligning the culture and getting the capability from the engineering departments, the procurement departments, the finance areas, and bringing them together to solve problems. And, and I think that's only possible if the leadership understand what you're trying to achieve. And I think the biggest challenge in organizations is getting their executive to understand the value through doing asset management, and then the outcomes. And one of the tools I've used, Rob, now is I measure the value that people create in what they do, not the tasks that they do. So in my area of the business, I expect a 10-to-1 return on investment. So I say to them, for every dollar we spend in my part of the business in asset management, we need to see a 10 times value creation to the community of New South Wales. And the moment you start to connect it to the value creation, people start doing all the high value jobs and forget about all the low value things that they used to do. Simple things like rewriting standards. So we have dangerous goods not allowed to go through tunnels. I challenged it. The standards people went through and analysed it. We did risk assessments on it, and we identified that it was more risky to send heavy vehicles with dangerous goods through town centres than it was to push them through tunnels. So we've now moved that we can now push dangerous goods through certain tunnels in certain locations. That's made a massive impact because those local communities will get their roads back. So the roads will no longer take any through traffic. So you think about that from a community and outcome perspective. It's a step forward, but at an executive level, they see that as a great community outcome and they sell the community outcome. They don't sell the asset management approach we took to get there. So hopefully that helps, Rob.
Thank you.
If I can add to that, Susan, and before I add, can I congratulate Rob on his award that he got, the Sergio Guy Memorial Award that made news in South Africa. So well done, Rob.
Well done, Rob.
I think in addition to what John said, you know, what people sometimes miss is that momentum that's created with a program like this. And what I mean by that is, I mean, asset management is a broad-reaching program. So if you have, it's a multitude of smaller problems that you collectively solve to really take a company to the next level. And in particular, I mean, I've got examples, for instance, mines in South Africa that was deemed to be closed because they simply became uneconomically viable because they got too deep or whatever the case might be. The ore body was too small, etc. And with proper asset management programs, amongst others, you know, they were able to think new in new ways how to solve the problem and how to be appropriate to that specific mine and the ore body that they're mining, for instance, so that they could be back into an economically viable company. And that effectively saves not just the community that's around that mine and jobs, all of that, but it creates an energy in that company and the people. And to see that, you know, it's not driving them with regulations, driving them with laws, driving them, it's creating hope, I almost want to say, and seeing the light and feeling that positive energy. And that is worth its weight in gold, excuse the pun. You know, that for me is almost, if you can get that right, it becomes self-sustaining. And it's not based on a specific individual or a key individual that's a strategist or really good at asset management. It's a collective whole that really starts pushing bigger objectives. Thanks.
Okay. Lafraia, would you like to add it all to this? We're wrapping up. We're starting to wrap up. So either around what you're seeing for advancements in asset management thinking or culture change or success moving forward.
Yeah, I think together with Rob question, I think asset management is a paradigm shift, thinking long term, beginning with the end in mind and a life cycle approach. I would say it has to bring new solutions for old problems, especially environmental, financial, and sustainability. You know, because as John said, breaking the walls within organizations, I think it's a powerful approach as well. It is a cultural change. You know, if you want to really change things, we have to leave the 1 year planning, the yearly or quarterly results, and aim at long-term commitment to the universal goals every place in the world are seeking. Sustainability, get rid of poverty, you know, a better world, instead of just thinking short-term, rapid gains. And asset management can bring some inspiration for that solution. And I think what Rob is saying, you don't need to just address regulations. You know, it's not just part of one generation. We have to bring all generation to a new approach regarding our planet, our environment. So it's really a powerful approach. I believe in that. I think it has the potential to change the game's rule as we are developing it. I think that's encouraging.
Sounds good. Naoki, did you have a comment on this?
Yeah, actually, thank you very much. I totally agree with the discussions. Then one of the most important points in the principles in asset management is a long-term view and then long-term strategies. I think it's all of the problems and issues are brought to the issues of the asset management eventually. So asset management very important to solve this problem. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking at the clock here and realizing we could go on for hours here. I'm seeing a ton of questions and the Q&A is all thank you, thank you, thank you. So I think I better wrap this up. I want to thank you for your insights and your sharing your thoughts on what this means in terms of resilience, unreliable times, how asset management is evolving within your regions of the world, things that we can take away about our next steps here in Canada for improving our asset management. And I appreciate the plug for the increased competency in our certifications. So for that, please go check out our PEMAC website because we've got 5 certifications now as well, and we're using that moving forward. So pretty exciting there. It's been a lot of hard work to get our new asset management certification stood up, CSAM, CPAM, and CTAM, to complement our previous CAMP and MMP certifications. I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to JP to wrap up the conference. But I want to thank Lafraia, John, Naoki, and Johannes for their valuable insight into today's presentation. JP, over to you.
Thanks, Sue, and I'd like to echo those thanks to Naoki, John, Johannes, and João. It's great to have that international perspective, and I think everything you've said resonates with all of our attendees, and it's good to see that asset management, the importance of it, and the things that we're tackling is standardizing across the globe. So all the more reason to have these global certifications and the GFMM as an organization to help associations like ours get in that global fold. So thank you very much for your insights. I also want to take time now as we're wrapping up just to thank everyone that I can. Certainly, I want to thank all the other speakers we've had over the last couple of days and those who also put content together prior to the conference, where we had a number of webinars available. Certainly want to thank our sponsors and exhibitors, who again, without them, it'd be very difficult for a not-profit association like ours to put on a conference like this. So thank you very much. Again, the conference session or this website will be open until November 30th. You can still go and check out content and network with people. It's still available for all those things. Finally, I'd like to thank the organizing committee. Again, superb job. Organizing committee has some PEMAC staff. It also has some volunteers from our membership. So thank you very much. I think the quality of the conference was excellent. Good variety, 4 tracks. That's amazing. I mean, think of where we've come from in the early days, and actually reflecting on the things that we're talking about these days. I remember, 15 years ago or so, we would talk about plant maintenance, spare parts, and preventive maintenance. Now I'm hearing things like public policy, life cycle management, dealing with climate change, community success. So it really shows how important is the work that we are all doing at all levels in the asset management spectrum. So I think we should feel really good about the work we do, and it just hearing these presentations and seeing these case studies really cements that, I think, for a lot of us. So thank you. And finally, I'd like to thank everybody who's attended. It takes time out of your day to do so, but it shows us with these record number of people we've had that this is something that you are looking for and you appreciate. And every year we wonder, is PEMAC, MainTrain going to be something we should continue doing? And year after year, we get feedback and we get attendance that says, yes, this is important. This is value added to our members. And so we're glad to announce that we are already thinking of MainTrain 2022, which, Gas can correct me, but I believe we've decided on Toronto. And we are looking to do an in-person event. Despite the success of the online, we are still hearing tons of people really missing that in-person get-together. And so that is our plan. And there we go on the big screen, our plans for MainTrain 2022. We might do a hybrid. We might still find a way to leverage this technology. It's been very useful for those who are really not able to join us. I mean, look at our final panel here. We've had people from around the world that maybe otherwise couldn't be here. So maybe we'll find a way to use both to make an excellent event for next year. So with that, thank you very much. Hope to see you in MainTrain in Toronto next year. And again, thank you to all those who helped put this together. Job well done. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I just want to add that if you want to come to a final networking session to share some of your learnings, please feel free to do that. I've put the link into the chat as well as into FeedLoop. I would suggest coming through just Zoom directly so that we can hear and see you, and we're not going to have any technical issues when it comes to the Zoom or to the FeedLoop side of things. On behalf of all the staff here at PEMAC, thank you very much, and we'll hopefully see you at the other link. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye. Thanks, Lafraia. Thanks, Johannes. Thanks, John. Thanks, Naoki.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks. Yes, thank you all. Thanks.